Welcome to Cloud on Air, live webinars from Google Cloud. We are hosting webinars daily. You are watching Cloud 101, where speakers discuss the fundamental concepts of Google Cloud Platform and learn from the best practices in different markets. My name is Nemo Omar, and today we'll be talking about getting hands-on with cloud cost management. Joining me today is Mark Merchandani. You can ask questions anytime on the platform, and we have Googlers on standby to answer them. Let's get started.
Let's get started. So today we're talking about beyond your bill, getting hands-on with cost management. And the idea here is really to explain cost management and what that looks like on Google Cloud. We'll quickly do introductions. I'm Mark Merchandani. I'm a cloud developer advocate, so I work with a wide variety of cloud tools and helping people understand what's available to them and how those tools work.
Yes, and I'm a cloud customer engineer, and I help enterprise customers on their journey to migrating to the cloud.
So let's take a look at the agenda for today and what we want to cover. First, we're going to talk about why cost management is so important. It's really easy to set up a cloud project. It's really easy to start using resources. Well, it turns out that at scale, that can be really hard to track down who's paying for what, where all these costs are going. So we're going to talk about why that's so important and what you can start to do to actually put that into control. Then we'll give a breakdown of some of the Google Cloud offerings that can help you work with cost management. We'll talk about the resource hierarchy and how to set up your organization. We'll talk about billing permissions and what that looks like for billing accounts. We'll go over a demo of billing reports, which is going to be a really useful tool that I think a lot of questions are going to get answered there. Then we'll talk about some of the more advanced things you can do, such as export your billing data, set up budgets and alerts, and then look at quota. Then we've got a few questions and answers prepared so we can dive into those. So after this webinar, we really want you to focus on three main aspects. First and foremost, you need to understand the resource hierarchy and how the permissions work for that. This is going to be really critical for setting up your organization and making sure that you can understand where those costs are coming from. Second, we're going to talk about how to use billing reports, and we'll show a demo of that, because that's really going to be this tool that answers a lot of questions. And then third, we're going to look at the additional options, as I mentioned before, exporting your data, setting up budgets and alerts and quotas, and then understanding what those tools let you do. So first up, let's talk about exactly that. Why is cost management so important?
Well, let's start with the basics, starting with what cloud cost management is and why it matters. The shift to the cloud promises accelerated innovation, increased efficiency, and reduced costs. But cost savings expected are not always realized. When making the shift to the cloud, you're moving from a traditional CapEx model to an on-demand OpEx model. This means that budgeting can no longer be a one-time annual operational process. You'll need to monitor your cloud costs on an ongoing basis due to the dynamic nature of the cloud. This is why cloud cost management tools are so important. The reality is that without the proper processes and tools in place, understanding and managing cloud costs can be complex. And this is especially true as organizations scale their business in the cloud. Now, the issues or the challenges that are related to this are pretty similar. We know that the second greatest barrier to migrating to the cloud is controlling costs, second only to information security concerns, and there's no surprise there. We know that 61% of IT and finance professionals cited lack of predictability as a top pain point for managing cloud costs. And what happens if you don't have any cloud tools in place? We know that 69% of organizations are going 25% over their budget, and 57% worry daily about cloud cost management. It's clear that there's a disconnect between what our expectations are and our ability to actually reach these goals.
Right. I mean, everyone talks about the ability to scale in the cloud, and that's a beautiful thing, but at the same time, that also makes it very easy to kind of go out of what you're expecting, right? And you're no longer limited by the resources that you physically have. So it's really important to set up these cost management tools, because otherwise you might just have your costs balloon up and you're not really sure, what am I actually paying for? And now that I'm paying for, what am I actually using?
Exactly. So we talk with a lot of different organizations, large and small, across a variety of different verticals. And we understand the common concerns and issues related to managing cloud costs. Google Cloud cost management tools provide visibility, accountability, control, and intelligence so that you can scale your business in the cloud with confidence. We want to make it as simple as possible for you to get visibility into your current and forecasted costs with built-in reporting dashboards and customizable dashboards. We also want to help drive greater accountability for cloud spending across your organization by providing flexible ways for you to organize your resources and allocate costs. And we also want to provide strong financial governance controls and intelligent recommendations for you to optimize your costs and usage. So let's go over the best practices for resource management. The way that you configure your resources can play a key role in helping you to understand your bill. So let's take a quick look at the core resources involved in administering your GCP account. Once you register your domain, you'll want to set up your organization. The basic function of an organization is to act as an umbrella that encompasses all of your other cloud resources. Next, you'll have a billing account. Now, the billing account keeps track of your charges for Google Cloud services that you're using. And for you to spin up any resources, you'll need to set up a billing account. Now, the billing account works in tandem with the payment profile. And the payment profile is a Google level resource. So it sits outside of your cloud organization. And it also helps you pay for any other services Google services you may be using, such as Google Ads. Now, your folders, projects, and labels, those are flexible mechanisms that you can set up in different ways for you to organize your resources. Anything you want to add here, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people, the payment profile is really all about controlling basically how you're paying for it, right? Whether it's credit card, invoice, whatever that is. Really what you're going to be looking at is the billing account and then that flexible structure that you have in your organization. So making sure that these map up to exactly what you need them to do to match your organization, which we'll look at on the next slide, is really critical to being able to track back where those costs are going. Then you're going to actually set up the permissions on the billing account in order to make sure that you know who's got the access to the billing account, basically, and then who can view all the costs for the attached projects. So why don't we take a look at that example for an organization?
Yeah. Now, this is a high-level overview of an example. Now, your organizational structure can look totally different than this. I've seen customers in the field set up all different types of organizational hierarchies. So taking a look at this is more of a team-aligned structure. So you've got folders for departments, teams, and then products, and you've got projects set up with resources and labels that align to each specific purpose of these resources, such as a staging environment, a development environment, etc. Now, I've seen a customer that I've worked with in the field have a multi-tenancy architecture where they have one project per customer. That way, they're able to view the cost per customer and charge them accordingly.
Right.
Anything you want to add?
It's going to look a lot different based on what your organization is. And like if you want to split up folders by lines of business, for instance, right? You can set that up at the folder level, and then you can set up your projects to organize all of your different resources and then use labels to kind of figure out. It's all very flexible. And the key here is that you make sure it matches what your organization looks like, because that's how your organization thinks. And that's how you're probably going to end up tracking costs back up through to the top.
Yeah, and these labels are really helpful because you can actually export these labels in your billing export, which we'll show later on in a demo. You'll be able to see exactly how much your staging environment costs, your your development environment, etc. Now, one last note about billing accounts here. Some customers that are just getting started in the cloud may want to sign up with self-serve or online billing, just signing up with a credit card. But as you scale your business in the cloud, you'll definitely want to work with an account team to set up invoiced or offline billing. Now, this means that you'll agree on the terms and you'll have greater flexibility to set expectations on what your cloud costs will actually look like.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to go to invoice billing as soon as you can. Because, again, getting started using a credit card, very simple and easy. But, you've seen some issues come up with using credit cards. You never want to make sure that the credit card might get rejected, something like that. You don't want to deal with that. So as soon as you can, especially if you're a medium or large, even a small business actually, switch to invoice billing as soon as you can, and you'll get a lot more reliability and much clearer expectations of what those costs are going to look like.
And you'll be able to take advantage of our discounts.
Absolutely.
So if you'd like to, this was a quick high-level overview, but if you'd like to learn more about billing, resource, organization, access management, we have set up a great playlist here with lots of content, some of our product managers, and some of our next videos that we think will be really helpful for you to learn more.
Yeah, we've got some great links that include this one as well, but I really, really recommend that cost management videos link there at the top, because that's going to be a collection of all these different resources and other deep dives that really explain most of these concepts in a much higher level of detail.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit about that organization looks like and how you can use it to structure like your organization, but then you've got this billing account that you're going to need to manage. Now, projects are attached to billing accounts so that they can all report how much they're actually spending, and that you can actually spin up resources inside of those projects to pay for them. You can set the permissions for this billing account on the billing account itself, or you can set them at the organization level so that they inherit down. This is kind of similar to how projects inherit resources as well, but the big idea here is that you want to make sure that you have the right permissions assigned to your billing account. Typically, the roles are billing account administrator, user, and viewer. A billing account viewer is going to be able to see the costs for that billing account and all the projects that are associated with it, even if they don't actually have access to change anything in the projects themselves. A user will additionally be able to add add projects to that billing account, so that as you bring on new projects, you can add them there. Only an administrator can actually remove projects from a billing account, as well as being able to contact billing support. So you want to make sure that when you assign these roles on your billing account to different users, and we'll show you what that actually looks like in a little bit, that you make sure you set it up correctly and that you give people the permissions that they actually need to get their job done. In order to make sure that you're able to organize these permissions, we really recommend doing 3 key things with your organization as a whole. First off, take any billing accounts that you have and move them inside of your organization. And actually, the second recommendation is to move all projects inside your organization. It can be really hard to get visibility into what's going on unless everything is inside an organization. And since permissions inherit down and you have visibility at an organization level, it's really critical to set up that organization correctly and then being able to control everything under it. The third thing we actually recommend doing is to remove the billing account creator role. Now, the reason for this is that we typically only recommend having a single billing account. When you use billing reports and when you use billing export and those sorts of things, most of them are done at the billing account level. So you want to make sure that you only have a single billing account, because otherwise you're trying to either replicate these steps across multiple billing accounts and then joining up all that kind of siloed data. It can be a big hassle that doesn't really add much benefit. One reason that you might need multiple billing accounts is if you're dealing with multiple currencies. So unless you need multiple billing accounts, we typically recommend only using one and making sure everything is grouped up inside of the resource hierarchy inside of your organization so that you have control over all of it. In addition, with the permissions, we have 2 important key concepts we want to make sure that you try to enact. The first is least privilege, and this is a very basic idea that's really important in cloud security. With all these different permissions and all these different user accounts, you can have people who have a lot of access to things, even if they're not supposed to. For both security reasons and just to avoid kind of mistakes, we recommend using a least privilege approach, which means only giving people permission to what they actually need. You can do this by creating custom roles. You can do this by making sure that you're really specific in how you assign roles to groups or users, and making sure that they only get access to what they need. So if I've got someone who needs to come in and spin up virtual machines, I'm only going to give them roles for Compute Engine so that they're focused on that and they're not touching other parts of the project. In addition, there's another there's another process called reasonable redundancy that we want to make sure you're very aware of, because especially roles like billing account administrators can be very key. And what you don't want to have is a single point of failure.
Right.
I mentioned earlier that billing account administrators are the only people that can contact billing support. Well, if you have one person assigned as your billing account administrator and that person is on vacation or gone or just can't handle that request at the time, then you're kind of stuck. So what we recommend doing is setting up multiple people, or better yet, using a group instead of people. That way you can easily just say, okay, this cost finance at my organization has the group of billing account administrators, and then either through G Suite or through Cloud Identity, I can manage who's in that group without having to change the permissions. So with these 2, you're really better enabled to make sure only the right people have access to the things in the cloud.
Yeah, and these two principles are a foundation for setting up a cloud center of excellence. Now, what we've noticed is that successful organizations and organizations that are successful in migrating to the cloud have a cloud cost center of excellence. And so what you're able to do is set up a cross-functional team, including folks from finance and IT, that work together to meet quarterly and set up budgets and decide what is important to the business and how much of a budget can we set for these projects so that we are able to stay on budget and on target. Now, finance and IT coming together is a really huge part of the success for this, so that you're able to really control costs. But you can also decide what are the priorities of the business and how can we stay on track for being innovative and staying on budget.
Exactly. It's going to take your entire team, it's going to take all of your teams in order to really set up successful cloud cost management. So with that out of the way, let's talk about some of the key questions that you answer when you're looking at cost management. So the biggest one is, of course, like, how much does my application cost? You want to know what you're actually spending and what those things actually cost. From there, the next kind of question is, where are they trending to, right? I know what they are now. What are they going to be tomorrow? What are they going to be in 30 days? How can I see where my costs are going? And of course, with where those costs are trending, you also want to figure out what's driving those trends.
Right.
So you want to be able to figure out what products, what processes, or what applications are causing your costs to change or not change. Once you kind of have a good idea and visibility into what your costs are, the next step is going to be to set up optimization, either through controls or through actual ways to bring down the cost based on what your workloads are. So let's talk about some of the tools that Google Cloud offers to help you answer those questions. So the first one we've talked about before is billing reports. We'll dive into that pretty deep in the next couple of seconds, but the key here is that it's a great tool built into the billing into the console so that you can just see where your costs are for a billing account and take a look at what the current costs are and what they're forecasted to be. After that, Billing Export, which we'll cover, lets you export your data out into BigQuery so that you can do further analysis on that, or you can kind of group in other pieces of data. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Then we've got budgets and alerts and quotas. These are great ways to set up cost controls so that you're able to say, I want to, I have a budget for my account. I want to make sure I only spend a certain amount of money. How can I make sure I'm on track to spend that? And then you can actually put some caps in place, which we'll talk about with quotas. And finally, there's recommendations. A great example of this is the right sizing recommendations from Google Compute Engine that let you actually give you recommendations and say, hey, you've got this big beefy virtual machine sitting here, but you haven't really been using it as much as you could have for the past 30 days. Why don't you actually downsize it, right? We're in the cloud, so it's easy to scale. You can downsize it, save some money, and then you're actually getting more information from Google about where you might be wasting a little bit of money. So first off, let's take a look at billing reports. So the billing reports are built into the console, and they're a really quick way to gain visibility into your current cost trends and forecasts. And we'll show you exactly what that looks like with a demo. But some of the common analysis that you might do with billing reports is really going to be around what am I actually spending, right? What are my costs and what are my cost trends? And then it can break it down. I can look at it for the entire billing account. I can break it up by project. I can break it up by GCP project, or I could break it up by SKU. Right, so some products like BigQuery, for instance, are billed based on both storage of data and analysis that happens when you query that data. So you can break it down by those levels and understand a little bit more about specifically where those costs are coming from. You can also filter out things like credits and see a little bit more about what those forecasts look like over the next 30 days, for instance. So with that being said, why don't we turn to a demo and actually see it in action, as well as looking at a billing account and managing some permissions there.
Yeah, so let's jump into the demo here. Oops. So let's get started. So we're already on the billing page here, but for you to even see this page, you'll need to have the billing account viewer role. So let's start out here in account management, and let's add a member. This is how you would be able to grant a role or permission access to see this page or to have the billing account viewer or billing account administrator role that Mark discussed earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and add myself. And I'm going to give myself the billing account administrator role. Now this means that I'll be able to see, manage, add folks, provide access to any of the billing accounts that I'm the billing account that I'm currently on, excuse me. Now the billing account user role we discussed earlier, this person is able to associate projects with billing accounts, but we said that that wouldn't be a best practice.
You can make sure that billing account users, they can add projects to a billing account, but they can't remove them. So it's really important to make sure that you assign, again, this least privilege, making sure you assign the right roles to the right people.
Exactly. And then the billing account viewer can just view the information associated with the billing account. So I'm going to go ahead and provide myself this access. And I've already added myself earlier, so I am now a member of the billing account administrator group. And as Mark said earlier, a best practice would be to create a group assigned to this role.
And the group process is the same way. You just type in the email instead of typing in the user's email, and then you've added a group specifically to that. Same process here. And then you can choose who's an administrator, who's a user, and who's a viewer.
Great. So let's jump into the reports. I'll go back here on the left side panel and select reports. Now let's get acquainted with this page. Now what we see here on the top left-hand side is our cost to date. So we can see here that $73.49 is what we spent between November 1st and November 8th, and that does not include any credits. Now we can see here that this cost is up from the last time period that we have here, which is October 24th to the 31st. Now we can also see here our forecast for the month. Now this is something that Mark mentioned earlier as a question that you may ask, which is, what are my forecasted costs? Where are my costs trending to? And you can see that here as well on the graph, that your costs are trending to go down from the last month. So let's take a look here at the graph. You can see your cost to date for this project, and we can see that there's a spike here on November 6th. So if we wanted to dig deeper and see what's causing my costs, what's causing my application costs to go up here. So we have some filters here so that we can dive deeper into this report and see what's going on. So you can set a preset to look at the current month, all projects. You could also select to take a look at last month if you wanted to see what was going on there. You can also look at the time range of your invoice month if you wanted to see exactly what's going to show up on your bill. You can also select a different time period up to the last 90 days, year to date. You could even select a custom range if you were interested to see what's been going on each week, etc. You can group the data here by project, by product, by SKU, and even by location, as Mark mentioned earlier. So what we'll want to do here, and you can also see projects, products, SKUs, locations, as we discussed earlier, to see what specific region and location data. And you can also either include the discounts or not include the discounts to see how much you're actually saving. So let's take a look here to see what's causing this spike. So when I hover over, I can see that on November 6th, there was a spike there in my label for CTG Dev. So let's take a look at this project, CTG Dev.
So we can easily use the right-hand side to filter by just the CTG Dev project, and then we can change the group by instead of project to product to see what product was causing that spike.
Exactly. So when I hover back over, I can see that there was an increased cost associated with the BigQuery product. So for me to learn even more about what exactly caused that, I'm going to group by SKU. I'm going to select the BigQuery SKU here. Just going to type to move quicker.
So we've got the graph here that's been broken up by SKU, and since we've filtered it, or actually you can change the product.
Sorry.
You can change the product to just BigQuery. There you go. So now that we filtered it to just BigQuery, we can see that the entire cost of this spike was actually analysis as opposed to storage. As I mentioned earlier, BigQuery is based on both storing data and on analyzing data. So we know now that this project, CTG Dev, has a big spike in cost thanks to BigQuery on the analysis side. This is enough information for us to go back to the team that's using BigQuery and say, hey, there's some kind of spike here. Can we figure out why this happened? You know, if I wasn't expecting a big query to be, it sounds like someone ran a big query here.
Yeah.
Let's figure out why that happened and then talk more to them about it.
Yeah, this analysis query really shows you who you need to reach out to, what product, what SKU, and exactly which project this happened on so that you're able to control your costs. So this is exactly how you would use the the billing reports page. Now I'll hand it back to Mark so he can talk a bit about billing exports and better ways to be able to manage your billing.
So there we go. So as we mentioned, it's a great way to get started with the analysis, right? Use it to quickly figure out what's going on, narrow down where you're talking about the product, the project, you can probably figure out from there what team it is, because ideally you've set up your organization in that way, right? So I know who's responsible for that project, the CTG Dev project in this case, and I know who's been working on the the BigQuery data in that project. So from there, I can go talk to the team, I can go look at logs. Setting up that culture of communication in your team is going to be really important to make sure that everyone is able to communicate effectively and figure out where those costs are coming from. So you've kind of, it's a multi-step process, but this is a great way to answer a lot of your cost questions and then figure out the best next steps to address them.
Right, and by setting up that cross-functional billing team, you'd be able to anticipate this query by talking about what will be worked on in the next month or quarter, and then you wouldn't be surprised.
Exactly. So billing reports help you detail out a lot of those questions at the high level, and they help you get to the next steps. Let's talk about some of the more advanced tools that you can take, including billing export. So this is actually an option you can set on a billing account to export all of that data into BigQuery. And it's really important, this is probably the most important best practice that we know when we talk to our customers, is that you enable this on day one. The reason for that is that if you don't enable this immediately, any data before you've enabled it won't be in BigQuery, and then you're going to be affecting what data you have to work with. We'll show you exactly how to set it up. It's actually a really easy process. You just go to the billing page, just like we showed you earlier, and you choose the billing export option. Pretty straightforward. It'll take you over to you'll be able to choose a data set from BigQuery. And what we actually recommend here is you can just set up another project specifically just to get these billing reports, this billing export, I should say, and then just export that into BigQuery for that project. right? Because you're sending data to BigQuery. You want to make sure that you're not maybe mixing it up with other stuff. And then you can have permissions just for that one project. So it's a really, really simple process. You can also do a file export, but we actually recommend the BigQuery one because it has more data. Once all the data is in BigQuery, you can pretty much do whatever you need to do with it, right? So if you've got more complex data that you need to fold into BigQuery, or you want to run some additional analysis on it, you want to maybe build some machine learning models on it with BQML.
I wanted to also say you can actually see the labels with the BigQuery export, where sometimes with the file export, it's compressed and you can't see all the details. So we recommend the BigQuery export. And you can also run a machine learning model with BigQuery ML, where you're able to forecast what your costs will be for the next year, or just sort of anticipate what that will look like.
Absolutely, yeah. So setting things up in BigQuery, doing the export to BigQuery is really, really critical to making sure that you have all the data you need to do, and then opens up all these possibilities for what you can do beyond just looking at the dashboard in billing reports. An example of that, maybe billing reports doesn't have the exact look that you need, or you need some custom kind of visualization. That's where Data Studio comes in. So Data Studio is a free Google Cloud tool that integrates right with BigQuery, and it lets you create custom dashboards. This can be really great because you can choose exactly which data you want to see or what data you think is most relevant to the team so that you can visualize it really quickly. Plus, it integrates directly with BigQuery. Now, it's not the only visualization that integrates with BigQuery. Popular examples are Tableau and Looker. Both of those have BigQuery integrations as well. So whatever your visualization tool your team is currently using, you can use that with your BigQuery data, or you can set up a custom dashboard in Data Studio. If we take a look here, if you Google, I think it's just BigQuery Data Studio template, there's actually a starter template that looks a lot like this one, excuse me, that lets you actually look at all of the data, very similar to the billing reports, but really breaks it down into a bunch of different graphs, including interactivity. You can hover over it, you can slice it up and choose drop-downs. This is a great way to get started in building your own custom visualization because, again, your business needs are going to be specific to your business, and you know what those needs are. So by putting that data into BigQuery and then building custom dashboards with Data Studio, you're really able to control and present the message and look at the data that you need to find quickly.
And it also creates that culture of showback that you were talking about, where you're able to share this with leadership as well as with the cross-functional billing team so that you're able to discuss these costs and see them.
So now that we've talked about visualization and what that looks like, let's talk a little bit more about setting up cost controls. The first place to look at that is budgets and alerts. Now, budgets are very simple to set up. You can set them up, again, at the billing account level. And what you're actually doing is you're choosing a group of projects or products, and you can kind of mix and match, and choosing a budget that you want to set against those. When you do this, for example, I might have a bunch of projects, and I want to say, show me the BigQuery costs against all of those, because I don't want to spend more than $1,000 on BigQuery. Or I might set one up for my development environment and say, I don't want to spend more than $200 on my development environment. What does that look like? By setting up a budget, you're able to type in the amount that you want, say $200, $1,000, or whatever, and then choose the thresholds for that amount, like 20%, 50%, 100%. Budgets by default will send you an alert over email so that you know when you've hit those thresholds that you've configured, right? This can be a great way to stay on track. You can say, oh, I know, I'm about halfway through the month and about 50% through my budget. Great, I know that's good. Or if I'm 100% through my budget halfway through the month, something's gone wrong. Maybe I need to figure out where those costs came from, and the first step to doing that would be going back to look at the billing reports. You can also set up a budget for a forecasted amount. So if I say $1,000 for my development environment, I'll get an email as soon as Google thinks that I'm going to spend $1,000 on that. And that can be really, really helpful in order to make sure that, hey, something's going on here. I'm going way over my budget and it's way sooner than I expected. This is a great way to get alerted as soon as you think, hey, something's up.
Right, and depending on how you set up your organizational hierarchy, you can set up a budget per project so that you're able to create projects maybe for R&D or for new developments that you want to try out, and that way you're able to track costs for that as well.
Yeah, another great example is setting up a budget for products that you don't expect to use, right? So if you have no expectation for anyone to use, let's say BigQuery, for instance, you can set up a budget for $1 on BigQuery, and then as soon as somebody exceeds the free threshold, you get an alert saying, oh, look, somebody has spent some money on BigQuery. You can then go and find out, where that was and how that money got spent. So using either actual costs or forecasted costs, budgets are a great way to get a notification when you hit a certain amount. And because of the flexibility, you can kind of choose what you're looking at. However, it's just an email alert. Actually, let me show you what the email alert looks like first. So this is the email that you'll get from a budget. It'll include all the important data that you need to figure out what budget it is. right? So this is the name of the billing account, the name of the budget that you set up, what that threshold was, right? This is a 50% threshold. It'll tell you the period of the budget and the date that it kind of hit that threshold. From this, you should have enough information to go back into billing reports and analyze what's going on. Or maybe you're just getting a notification that's on par with what you expect, and you say, great, now I know that I'm at 50% of my budget, so I feel comfortable with that. It's really up to you to decide what you want these emails to do, but it is a very constant and great way to get reminded of that.
Right, and not everyone checks their email, so I'm sure you can show us some other ways to get notified.
So in addition, in case your email inbox looks a little bit like mine, then it might be better to put in some more managing cost controls in place, and we'll look at what's called programmatic budget notifications. Now, what these let you do is they actually let you automate a response to a budget rather than just sending out an email. And it does this through another tool we have called Google Cloud PubSub. You don't have to worry about that. It's just a very simple messaging framework. But the idea is that the budget, instead of sending out an email, will send an alert through PubSub, and then that can go to anywhere you want it to. A great example of this is Cloud Functions. So in the links that we'll show you later in the documentation, we've actually got sample code that you can set up and do something. A very common example is post a budget alert to Slack, right? So more people are on top of chat than they are on top of email sometimes, and that can be a great way to get a notification way sooner than you might get to it in email. It's also a great way to prepare for, again, surprises that you're like, oh, I didn't expect this to happen. You can also take some more extreme examples. So if you have a development project and you only want to spend a certain amount of money on that development project, you might want to say, okay, I've hit my budget. I'm actually going to shut down all the resources for that project, right? It's a little bit of an extreme example, but you can actually just stop them entirely so that you're not spending any more money on them. And then you can take the appropriate action by talking to your team, figuring out what's going on in order to make sure that you're not passing that hard budget. An even more extreme example is you can disassociate the billing account from that project, but that can cause a lot of resources to shut down and be deleted. So you only want to do that in really extreme circumstances when you're sure that it's probably a development environment and you just don't want to spend more money than you've set your budget to. So there's some great examples of this in the links that we'll share at the end of the presentation, but highly recommend checking this out if you want to take a little bit more automated response to those budget alerts. Another tool for that is quotas. So quotas are a little bit different from budgets because they're actually set at the resource or an API level. So if you want to control how many times, for instance, how many times per second somebody can call an API, or if you want to control how many machines you have spun up. Or another great example that I've seen before is controlling the amount that your team can query in BigQuery per day.
Yes,
You can set up all kinds of all kinds of resource controls in quotas because you're able to set those hard quotas, and this will just stop people from being able to execute once that quota gets hit. You can use this to really put in hard caps and then monitor, how people are using these different resources. So budgets are really meant more for the billing side of things, right? Making sure that you set them on projects or billing accounts, making sure that you get notification, or you can set up the advanced one, the programmatic budget notifications.
And automate the process.
To automate it and do whatever you need it to do, versus quotas, which are really just hard, inflexible caps that let you control those. And the reality is that to do an effective cost management strategy, you're probably going to use both of these, right? Pick the right tool for where it fits and use both of these to kind of control who's spending what where.
Now keep in mind that some quotas you can change in the console, but others you may need to open a support case. So be careful with the quotas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're both going to be very useful tools, and there's like an integrated form that you can fill out and they'll send it out there. They're both very, very useful tools, but they serve different purposes. So if you're just getting started, budgets is a very easy way to just set up, show me an amount of money and then send me an email if it goes up too high. Quotas are even better for, kind of putting in hard caps, and it'll be up to you for which one makes sense. So we've got some really, really great training that we highly recommend. So Nemo, can you talk a little bit more about what these trainings look like?
Definitely. So this was a high-level introductory overview, as we said. But if you wanted to get more hands-on training or more in-depth knowledge about billing, what we have here are 2 quests. So understanding your GCP costs, both of these are, I believe, 7 hours. One is 9 hours of video and the other is 7 hours. And both of these will give you a more in-depth look with hands-on labs through Quick Labs, and these are in sandbox environments if you haven't used Quick Labs before, but completely mirror the Google Cloud Console. We also have Optimizing Your GCP Costs, which allows you to learn more about setting up budgets and alerts and more in-depth ways to sort of control and optimize your costs. But both of these are free until January 8th, 2020. So if you're looking for something to do over the holiday break, This is a great way to get started on that cost center of excellence that we talked about. And this will really help you learn how to also just like the hands-on experience that we talked about throughout this lab. This will give you that experience.
Yeah, so understanding your GCP costs really helps kind of concrete in some of the things we talked about visualizing, right? With building reports, with building exports, seeing that data and understanding, hey, what am I spending? What am I forecasted to spend? And what's driving those costs? Optimizing your GCP costs, all about budgets, alerts, setting up more complex examples. You know, these two trainings cover a wide variety of both instructional material and also the hands-on material. So it can be a great thing not only for your finance teams and the teams who are responsible for controlling the costs, but also for the IT teams, because these do, you know, especially in the optimizing layer, you can get a little bit more technical. You might need to write some code if you want to set up some more advanced optimization. It's going to be a team effort. And so we recommend, you know, lots of people should take these. If you use the links that are on the screen now, you can make sure that you get access to them for free. So it's really, really important, you know, up until January 8th, 2020. So it's really important to kind of get on these right now to get that video content, and then also to do the hands-on pieces so you can start to understand the tools and then figure out, you know, how does this relate to my business, right? What are these things that for my organization make the most sense? So let's talk about some of the best practices.
Yeah, so let's start talking about some of these. We mentioned them throughout the entire presentation, but we'll point them out to you one more time. Enabling BigQuery billing export on day one is super important to analyze that detailed data so that you're able to see where your costs are trending and keep track of them over time. We talked about structuring and organizing your GCP resources for fine-grained cost reporting using organization, folders, projects, and labels, especially those annotated labels. They really help a lot.
Yeah, that flexibility there to match your organization is really going to help you make sure you have both the visibility that you need to see everything, but also reduce any friction points when you're trying to track down who's spending which cost where.
Exactly. Configuring policies with granular permission. So this was super important. I think Mark really drove it home with the reasonable redundancy and the principle of least privilege, which applies to all cloud security. So this is super important.
Yeah, you want to set it up so that people have exactly what they need, no more, so you can make sure you're both protected from a security or a mistake standpoint, but also for those really important roles, you don't have a single point of failure.
Exactly. And this is my favorite one, building a culture of show back in your organization. So reviewing billing reports on a monthly or quarterly basis and engaging executive stakeholders and leadership is super important so that you're able to have that buy-in, but also creating that culture where IT and finance work together make a huge difference in controlling cost and spend.
Yeah, I think the trainings that we had linked to before, especially the optimizing cost one, talks a little bit more and shows you a little bit more about why it's so important to have both of those teams work together. And you know, working with some of the customers that you've worked with, I'm sure you've seen great success from kind of creating that culture.
Definitely. It makes a really big difference in your migration to the cloud when you have agreements between IT and finance. When you're able to come with the IT team saying, hey, we're looking to build these projects or we're looking to develop these new applications, and for the finance team to take a look at the budget and say, this is how much we can allocate. That partnership goes a long way when the bill comes.
Yeah, so. and especially when it comes to the more technical aspects of setting up like programmatic budget notifications.
Exactly.
Those are, you know, you can have all of these business rules that are enabled by using, you know, kind of the code side of things. And so you need help to not only visualize that, but also to get yourself in a place where you can track all your costs. So this is a recap of some of those next steps we highly recommend. Those first two, those are the trainings that we mentioned. Again, those bit.ly links will make sure that you get the free access by going through Quick Labs up until January 8th, 2020. So highly recommend getting started on those and not only having your finance team, but also all of your teams maybe take a look at those and get just a good understanding of what they're going to be dealing with. Then that's that same cost management videos link. That one's got all kinds of webinars, talks at Next, and different topic videos that drill down into more information about the wide variety of things we covered and really drilling into what's important about them. And of course, you've got the documentation, the release notes. Those will give you the actual, you know, in-depth technical pieces of what's going on, as well as give some hands-on guides and, you know, full spec work for what these billing, you know, what the different tools that we talked about look like. So I think it's time for some frequently asked questions that we've heard from customers and from other teams we've worked with. So I'll take the first one. I mean, does it cost money to analyze my data once it's in BigQuery, right? I talked about this a little bit before with, you know, using billing export. So typically speaking, you want to export to a separate project. That way you're not worried about, you know, other people using BigQuery in that same project. There is a free tier of BigQuery at the storage level and at the analysis level. And typically speaking, the billing data is pretty small. So you're not really going to hit that free tier of storage. You might hit the free tier of analysis if you're doing a tremendous amount of analysis. So it's important to kind of plan that out and maybe put a budget on your BigQuery analysis project so that you know when people are doing the actual data. But by default, billing export on BigQuery probably won't get near that free tier unless you're doing some really fancy stuff.
Okay. So I'll take the second one. Can I incorporate the spend from my other cloud providers? So I've worked with a variety of customers that have chosen to have a multi-cloud strategy. And so the best practice that I've seen here is using the billing data export. And you can either export this into Data Studio and sort of have the other cloud provider spend there, or you could use Splunk if you decide to use a third-party provider. And we do have a Splunk plugin that works with GCP, so that's another option there.
So can I use Data Studio to send a daily spend report to my leadership team? Again, once it's in BigQuery, you can kind of do whatever you need to do, especially if you're using another business intelligence tool or visualization tool. But Data Studio does have a way to set up email summaries. So if you just search for that, you can see a very easy way to send pretty much daily reports to people directly from Data Studio. So it's a great tool to get started with. And then depending on your needs, you may want to move to another tool, or you might be able to handle all of it within Data Studio.
My business KPI data isn't currently in BigQuery. It's in another database. How can I easily migrate it into BigQuery? Now, the way that you would want to do this is export your billing data to BigQuery, and then you'll want to use an ETL pipeline, maybe data prep and data flow, to import and transform the data. Now, BigQuery takes exports in CSV form, and I think there are other couple formats, so there's a way for you to easily do this.
Yeah, and ultimately, like a big part of this is going to be, again, going back to that culture of having your team all work together, because some of this part can get a little bit more technical, right? You'll be needing to export from different places, you'll be needing to aggregate it, but BigQuery is a great place to aggregate it, and it makes it very easy to kind of join all that data together and start to look at trends across not just your Google Cloud costs, but whatever costs you're importing in there. So getting help from the IT teams to import that data and aggregate it all together, very, very possible, and BigQuery is probably a good place to do it. And then how can I see what committed use discounts I'm utilizing? We talked a little bit about this, but committed use discounts are a great way to basically, if you have a stable kind of cloud cost, especially for a compute engine, and you say, I'm going to need these 8 CPU cores or vCPU cores for a long time, I can set up a committed use discount, which is like a contract that says I'm going to use these all year. And as a result of setting that contract up, Google Cloud will give you a lower price on those cores. That can be really helpful because you're going to be paying for those cores whether or not you use them, but they're going to be much cheaper than they would be. So it's a great way to set that up. However, it can be kind of complicated if you've got lots of committed use discounts set up. So what we recommend doing is looking at the committed use discount analysis report. That's under billing, under the same left-hand pane, you'll see one that says committed use discount analysis, and that one will actually show you what your committed use discounts look like, which ones you're using, which possible resources you had that could have been in there, and then maybe you see room for places to add more committed use discounts, or maybe you've got one that you're not using. The committed use discount analysis report is definitely the best place to check all of that out because it quickly focuses on just committed use discounts and it lets you see all of that data. So with that, I think we're just about wrapped up here. If you have any questions, please email cost-management-webinar@google.com. As I mentioned before, we've got all those super good links, the video links, and most importantly, the training. Like that training is really, really useful, so make sure you take that. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in, and please visit Cloud on Air for more content from Google Cloud experts.